You've booked the buses. The theme's locked in. The camp speaker is on the calendar and his hotel room is booked. And your camp t-shirts are somewhere due to tariffs on the slowest boat from China. But listen, you think all the hard work is done, right? You just got to sit back, just enjoy camp, hope no kid pulls a fire alarm or breaks an arm. Well, who knows?
Here's the truth. Right now, even if your camp plans are set in stone, you still have the power to change your students' lives in the behind the scenes moves, the things almost nobody gets to see, but everyone feels that make the difference. That's what turns camp from just another highlight reel into a launching pad for real, lasting ministry back home.
So today, if you haven't already guessed it by what we're saying, we're handing you the playbook for making this camp one that actually matters. And we're not going to change your budget, your schedule, and all the other things that are set in stone. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into what really matters before, during, and after camp, and how the best wins are almost always behind the scenes. So let's get started.
I believe that we stand on the verge of a historic moment.
You ask them what it is about rock and roll music that they like, and the first thing they'll say is the beat, the beat, the beat.
I found pardon for my past, power for the present, bright prospect for the future.
If you talk to the average teenager of today, I know what it does to you.
That could have an unparalleled and unprecedented impact.
I've got a story to tell. Have you?
Welcome to the SSM podcast. I'm Ian Dunaway.
And I'm John Oliver.
And, you were going to say something.
Well, I'm good.
I was going to say, we're excited to be back. We took a week break and we got a lot going on, but we also know summer's upon us. Camp prep. Summer gets crazy. It's funny because summer is both the most restful period in student ministry and the most hectic all at the same time, because I think it's because your schedule just changes and it feels a little better and you're doing things that are different. And so, listen, we know that it is first of all, I'm not an events guy. I don't think event-driven ministry is healthy. I don't think that it leads to good change, but I do believe that there are several events that you should do, especially for students, that are wins. And I think camp is one of them.
Well, and, I made a post in Youth Pastor Central on Facebook about entertaining students in order to keep them means you're not actually doing the work of real discipleship.
I saw that.
And we had some really good conversations. And so launching from that Facebook comment into this podcast, the people that are connected with me probably are like, well, how can you say this and also say that? Well, because I never said events were bad. At no point have we said events or entertainment are bad. It's just the things that we're depending on. But here's another big claim. So I made that claim. Here's another big claim for us. You don't need a bigger budget. You just need a better plan.
That's what I'm talking about. So that's a win. And I think that we get stuck to one. Your post was very clearly about if you get people with entertainment and you try and keep them with entertainment, that's the problem. I think that you absolutely, students, we model with camp and with D-Nows. If you don't know what a D-Now is, it's a weekend discipleship event in homes.
And if you're not doing it, you need to be.
Yeah, I agree. Odds are, unless you were in the South and at a Baptist church, you just called it like Genesis Weekend or Reset or something like that. You've been to a Disciple Now. The point is, strategic events are a win, but they're also not entertainment based. And my point is that you are bringing students together. You're having fun. You're enjoying, like as if following Jesus could actually maybe be fun. And then you are helping them get away the same way that Jesus would model us to get away and to focus on our community with others, to focus on our own spiritual journey. So we're all about camp. And the truth is, if you're listening to this point, you're into camp too. So as we're doing that, here's the problem. John, much like when I get into arguments, sometimes with my wife, sometimes with other people, I am done with the argument. We've laid it down. And then all of a sudden, a zinger pops into my mind. And sometimes at camp, you can spend a lot of time getting ready for camp, prepping, preparing, you're planning the event side of it. And then you get to where you can't change anything. And then a zinger comes into your mind. And I think that sometimes we forget that the most important things you can do to make camp a success are things that have nothing to do with the unchangeables. It's not about changing location. It's not about changing your theme. The themes are important, but it's not about changing all those things. And so we want to talk through it. The big claim here, like you said, if you don't need a bigger budget, you just need a better plan. I think why camp is the highest leverage week of the year for you is that it allows you to put your students in a place that, and your leaders in a place, leaders are key, that will launch them into the school year reinvigorated, challenged, and with a plan. And so we're
And often with new relationships or stronger relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And the crazy thing is, the reason camp exists are things you can change beforehand, right? And so we're giving you cheat codes here. We're gonna give you 5 behind the scenes moves to make camp the start of something lasting and not just a highlight reel. And so we're gonna talk about camp beforehand, in between, and after. This one's a little bit more scattered feeling. It's more like just a conversation about camp with a couple of student pastors who love it. And so let's just start with this one, creating clear expectations. That's a big one. And so, how you communicate with your parents, your leaders, and your students. Now, parent communication could be tough if you're a week before camp, right? We used to, even when we had smaller numbers, but I've taken up to 600 kids to camp. I have taken down to 10 to camp, right? One of the things that we think is really important is doing multiple parent meetings, just 2, but giving parents the opportunity to speak into it, to read. You should always have a parent pack, and we may actually include that. That's going to be one of our resources. It just hadn't come out yet, but a guide to creating the best parent pack possible for camp that has your disciplinary rules, has emergency contacts, what to bring, what not to bring. But this is,
we have a sheet we call the things we have an understanding about.
It's a long
and
name.
So yeah, it's probably needs a better title.
The sheet of the things we have an understanding about may change over time when we decide about something else.
But that sheet's the one that has like the weird rules, like students are not permitted to leave to go get tattooed, like because at some point, actually that's not one that one didn't happen to me. That one I inherited. And so that was when there was a student pastor that was the student pastor for 16 years. That was prior to me. And I inherited that sheet from him. And I kept it on there because I'm like, dude, what in the world? He said, oh, yeah. He said, this one year, he said, I had 2 guys disappear with a leader. And the leader went and sat with them. And they were like college age kids, but they all got tattooed at camp. And he said, so now it is in there, things we have an understanding about. You will not go get tattooed at camp.
Here's how we fixed it. We used to do camp a lot at Panama City Beach, so specifically the Majestic. So you take 400 or 500 kids to the Majestic, you do all this planning. And listen, we probably next year should do some how to plan for camp podcasts, like how to do the planning we're not talking about now. But we'd get everything laid out, we'd take them, and we just had a rule. I think this is really important. This will be in our kit that we reveal. But there's 3 levels of discipline, and we did the 3 levels of discipline. There's one circle that your leader can deal with, and it's just not a problem. Like, leader deals with it. Second level is the leader has dealt with it several times. You're not changing it, so then you bring them to us, and we talk about it. Third level, and we had like we'd laugh with them, but we go, the unforgivable sin is what, a rule or whatever. And there were a couple of rules that we just said. One, a third level offense means you've either breezed through 1 and 2 and you've taken something small and made it so big that we're just going to send you home, or you did this one thing, and your grace in this is that that if you do it, you're gone. And one of them was
you jump straight to 3.
One of them was crossing the road at Panama City Beach, because that's where all the tattoo parlors were. That was the joke. It's like they're going to get a tattoo, or some kid's going to come home with a tramp stamp. And then there were a few of them like no guy or girl ever allowed in an opposite gender, room. And that was, we never had anybody break that one. Another one was, but like, I know this sounds crazy, but like tobacco, alcohol, those were level 2 offenses that only one time in 20 years now, I had kids bring a bunch of, their baseball players brought a bunch of tobacco, and it was hilarious because their leader, also, we made it clear that we could search any room at any time we wanted to. That none of the rooms belonged to the leaders or the students. They were ours. So I felt like James Bond when one of the leaders said, I think my boys got dip, and I don't know where they're at. And so Keith handed me the key, and I said, you go to worship. And I'm going through, and I felt like Sherlock Holmes because I looked around. I was like, why is that mattress askew?
Yeah.
And I picked it up, that it's just dip bottle and 3 cans of dip.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I had that happen. I had that happen where this kid brought they're called logs, where you get like all the, basically you get 1 can, but you get 10. He brought a whole log for the week. And I found him on like day two is when I saw him. And I'm like, Nathan, just got to hand him over. And I told his dad knew that he did. So after the trip, I said, I called his dad and I said, hey, what do you want me to do with them? He said, just throw them away. I'm like, okay, all right. That's what I was going to do, but I just want to make sure because that's a lot of money. But that's just student ministry in the Southeast right there. I had to call Dad to report the dip and ask what to do with it.
And he knew. He was
like, he knew. His dad was like, oh, yeah. His grandma did that for, he didn't really.
Well, having expectations up front is key. Even expectations, like we tell them what to leave at home. One of the things to leave at home is a bad attitude. And it's like when you come, you're expected to enjoy yourself, to have fun. One of the things that's always, I don't know why it's dramatic. I know why it's dramatic and controversial, but it is this way, but it's one we won't budge on. And it's going to kind of roll into some of the other things we're talking about. But one of those is cell phone policy. Now, this is mine. You and I are probably going to even disagree, but have different ways of doing some of this. And so for me,
I know one of the things coming up we'll have a difference on.
We will. So all that to say, I think when it comes to cell phones, here's what I do. I have some general rules, but my main rule is because I want to empower my leaders is your leader controls your cell phone. And because you should not be with anybody and I tell the leaders, I don't want them to have them at night when they go to bed. But they can have them like we have late night events and things like that where you get your phone, you take pictures. But I've had more drama over that. But here's the thing: I ask leaders, keep them in your fanny pack or wherever you got to keep all their phones with them, because parents for some reason have decided that in 20 years, like they didn't grow up with cell phones, but somehow their kid's going to die without them. And the truth is, they're not. And that's one that we hold to because the living off of the dopamine hit of cell phones, kids taking selfies together is not making community memories. And that's what I always get. Well, it's really hard. I said, well, do you need those phones? Well, I don't know if I need them. Well, your leader will give them to you. But, and then I have parents that sometimes sell me out and go, well, go talk to Ian about it because he said this and I know that's different. And I'm like, no, you need to just be the parent. So cell phones are a big deal, but that kind of rolls into one that I think is important is planning rec versus free time.
Oh yeah.
And how do you do that? And
that's one in 15. And I think you would agree. So you've been doing this, 18 years? I've been doing it 15.
I'm on my 21st year.
You're on your 21st year.
Oddly enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So the crazy thing is, 15 years ago when I started, I would tell you we've got a program rec.
Every minute of every day.
Every minute of every day has got to be programmed. Yeah. It's so crazy to me how radically different students are now compared to 15 years ago.
Just that. Yeah. Just
15 years. They're so the stuff that they do is so programmed all the time that some of what we program is free time. So like when we go to the beach, we do beach camp.
Yep. And
what we do is we program the morning. So from 8 a.m. till noon, we program. From 12 to 6 is free time. Now there's things we can do and none of it's like unsupervised. Like there's a group that goes to the beach. Yeah. There's a group that goes to the beach. There's a group that stays at the pool. There's a group doing volleyball tournament, like all that stuff, group doing basketball, but it's free time. And so you can choose to do that. And then we kind of have them on rotation where if you want to switch, like every 30 minutes, we'll kind of walk you over, but it's free time. It's not regimented, but it's so funny to me that the students are so like, is it okay for me not to be doing something right now? Like the free time aspect of it, you're teaching them like, hey, it's okay just to not have anything to do. You're at the beach.
And this, I tell parents this all the time, that if you don't have a good number of bored moments in your home, you don't have a good family culture. Meaning if you don't have moments where you have to find something to do because you don't have something for you, that's not healthy for us. And so I'm with you on that. In fact, every time we do camp, all my kids go, for the last several years, they've gone, well, there's nothing. They went, man, I needed such a break. This is crazy. And we do, we play Uno or we play, Jackbox games on the TV, and we do stuff because we do camp a little bit differently at a church. We're at a church plant. So my 600 kid days are over and church plants where we're at. And so just a smaller group, and they absolutely grow with that. Here's one thing that I did even just a few years ago at another church. I did rec, but rec was only 2 hours of the day for 250 to 400 kids. It was only 2 different hours of the day. It was a high school rec, middle school rec. And here's what I built: my entire camp setting around team unity and student unity. So 12th grade girls got a 6th grade boy group component that was connected to them, and they shared points. And we balanced them that way. Senior guys got 6th grade girls. And then we kept moving them up. And so sometimes your power teams were the guys in the middle that life never works out for them as freshman or sophomore. But they had a more balanced team. So we did our best to do that. And then we would have an hour of rec per grade group. And it would be fun stuff. So we'd have a big relay race towards the end of it. That was fun at the very end of camp. But like we would do stuff. I've done Angry Birds on the beach, do Kajabi Can, which is a win. You should do that if you've never done that game. 3, we did.
I got bucket golf for this summer.
Bucket golf is a win. The other huge win was one of the last big games I did was human foosball. And we set up a huge, and it's easy. You got a big ball. You got pool noodles on a rope, and then you just into the beach, you knocked in T-posts and covered it in construction fencing. Not very expensive. And they would play. So that's what they do. But we would have about 3 to 4 hours an afternoon of free time, and they loved it. I think what's interesting is that free time can make or break spiritual conversations, community conversations. Giving your leaders and your students, because that's usually what you get when you overprogram. I didn't get enough time to talk with my kids about this stuff. Well, we would make it to where, you always had to be in at least groups of 3 if you were older, but you had to be with a leader most of the time. And the idea was, man, there are absolutely bad free time moments, but they're far outweighed. Like this idea, most of the older guys and maybe the more traditional guys in here, I'll hear, and girls, well, you don't want them getting into trouble. And most of what they're saying, I just say that as being a jerk, but most of what they're saying is old school back and we're trying to fight a problem we used to have. And those are the problems we're comfortable with, rather than saying, well, what do I do if I have too much free time? Well, what do? You really take the time to objectively look at it, because almost always the problems we have now are not the problems we wanted. And I do think, I'll throw this out, by the way, just to drop a bomb. 2-piece versus 1-piece bathing suit policy. And when we talk about clear expectations, that has been one that has either made people very happy with me or very angry with me. And I think even in your rules, that's a chance to disciple students. And so I've had this policy for 20 years now. And I learned this from somebody else. We allow 2-piece bathing suits, no string bikinis. Guys were like, no Speedos, guys, but I've never known a guy that wore Speedos. So
I unfortunately have known one.
That's sad, but only one in your years. With girls, here's the thing. 1-piece bathing suits, you're going to fight. If you don't tell them why, you're just trying to make them mechanically do something in order to please the rules. And that's not discipleship, because now the whole thing is the number of absolutely immodest 1-piece bathing suits is ridiculous. And so the 1-piece rule doesn't really apply.
1-piece bathing suits are not that great anymore. To get a nice one, the one that we would have gone with like in the 90s when you're growing up in that culture,
because they're
really expensive, and the girls don't like. It's really not fair to ask the girl's family to spend $100-$200 on that 1-piece
that they're never going to wear again,
and they're never going to wear it again. And so what we do is we say, hey, here's the deal. Number one, you need to be covered, guy or girl.
Yeah,
but in such a way that you need to understand, like, this is beach camp. And when we do rec, we need to be able to do that when you're in your swimsuit, which means it needs to be athletic, and things don't need to be able to shift around during activity and come out, guy or girl. And so we ask people to do, modest, as far as, we want you covered. And, there are some things that we'll say, like, hey, probably not. Right. But also, it's not the youth pastor's job to step in and have that conversation. We release our female leaders to have those conversations, because it's not something. Depending on the 35-year-old me, 35-year-old me doesn't need to go to a 15-year-old or a 18-year-old or 13-year-old girl and say, hey, you really need to cover up.
We always designate, depending on the size of your group, it's good to designate one. Maybe it's your wife, but if your wife doesn't do that ministry with you, one woman that's going to be like the you of dealing with guys, and you just say, hey, I need you to deal with that and talk to him. But the way we'd be even more explicit, John. We'd say all swimwear modest. You can 1-pieces, modest 1-pieces, modest 2-pieces, but we said no string bikinis, no bandos without straps. I didn't even know what a bandeau was when we wrote that. But that being said, here's what it did. Some people were really thankful they didn't have to spend a bunch of money on extra stuff. The other thing is, I had the most hypocritical and hateful people go, I can't even believe we let boys and girls swim together. But at the same time, What about, they said, well, I can't, this woman had her granddaughters took Instagram pictures in bathing suit, like 2-piece bathing suits and stuff. And so, but she tried to ambush me at a couple meetings and asked me, and I said, listen, here's the thing. You're having conversations on modesty that nobody else is having because of this rule. And this rule allows you to step in. And when somebody goes, well, what's modest? Why not a string bikini? Well, because an 80-year-old man is going to look at you the same way an 18-year-old man is going to look at you. And then I would hear him go, well, what about all the boys at camp? Well, that's a discipleship problem if they can't keep their eyes off of all these girls. So like you, and then these are the same people that'll argue, well, it's all very targeted and sexist that you, well, no, the truth is both women need to guard and be modest and men need to guard their eyes. And so, but I told them, I said, we're going to Panama, or we're going to Panama City Beach, or we're going to, this beach or that beach. Do you think that there's not going to be other people on the beach too? Like if we're worried about that, our leaders and our guys, we empowered them to have conversations of, hey, eyes up here, kind of an idea. But I've never really had I've never seen very many girls in the years that I've done this, the thousands of students I've literally taken to camp, really push that rule, because it changes it from I'm trying to get away with something to, I understand the standard. Yeah. And I think that's a win. But before camp, being honest about all those things and really thinking through how are we going to do this, you can make those changes way up to camp, and they're not unchangeable times. The other thing is during camp, and we have two things. There's a lot of things we could do. Two big things that we think make camp a win at camp. The first one is not controversial. The second one we will disagree on. But and I think it's good that we disagree on it.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer to it. I think there's a preference and conviction to it, to us. And I think that that's fair, because I'm not going to, you're going to think my way is wrong. I'm going to tell you that I don't think your way is right or wrong. I think that that is the conviction you have in your church. I think you got to do it.
That's right.
That being said, group link at camp, and group link is just a word for getting. So one of the things we would do, we always hear, don't let the 2-week rule apply to you 2 weeks after camp. And God never did anything with you, you heathens. We push that, but we don't do anything at camp that really pushes them forward. And so here's what I want to challenge you with. Okay. Do something like a group link at camp. I think when you recruit your leaders, you need to recruit leaders that are current small group leaders if possible. Or test out your future small group leaders there at camp. And what we would do is we specifically had home groups, but if you have Sunday school groups, whatever it is, we took Thursday night at camp before Friday, and we would get all of our leaders and students together, and they would not necessarily get in their small groups. They would get together in the groups that they would be in after camp. Mm-hmm. And we got them together with their leaders. We introduced them. We told them to switch numbers. And we said, listen, and we explained to them, if it stops here, it's not worth our time. But these are the people you're going to be meeting with on Sunday nights after camp. And we said, this is where you need to be. And man, when I tell you we had retention, we had 280 students, high school students in small groups every year. But that number grew exponentially because when they went to camp, they knew where to go after. The one question every student should be able to answer on the last day is, that's where I'm going on Sunday. That's where I'm going next Sunday, right? And so that, prepping students to know post-camp who their leader's going to be, who the people they're going to be with is key. Now, on to the controversy. Do you want to start it?
Yeah, I was going to do like a drum roll, but my screen would shake. So, baptism at camp.
Do we do it?
Yeah. Do you or do you not? I think it would be funny for you, listener, to pause and decide, do you think I am pro or against it? And is Ian pro or against it? So
you can pause now.
Pause it now.
Okay, we're back.
Yeah, we're back. You probably didn't pause.
On 3, do you want to say yes or no? As if like,
I think we just go. Yeah. Ready?
All right. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
No.
Now, yes, with the caveat that it doesn't have to happen, but I'm okay with it either way. So I can live in a lot of places because I have been a lot of places. And for me, I think there's a lot of different ways to do things. So I personally have always done, and probably will for a long time, do that. But John, I don't know how we want to do this conversation. Do you want to explain? Do we want us to both explain or just discuss it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to say would be like, because I'm probably not like the popular opinion on that. I think that there's been a lot of guys. I think there's been a lot of guys I've known in the years that have been pro doing that.
I don't think it has to do with genuinely. I don't think that it has to do with for it or against it. And I'm going to have to fall on the side of it where even though I'm pro baptism at camp or good with it, I don't want to be in the camp of most of the guys that are. It's because most of the guys that are are numbers whores, and they are all about posting on social media about how many baptisms they had, because that's all that the SBC, if you're in the I'm not in the SBC, John is.
I'm SBC.
But the SBC is all about counting baptisms, because you can't really count decisions, but you can count baptisms because it physically happened. And that is not the world I'm in. I don't care if you've got 70 or 7. I care that they are genuine baptisms and healthy things. And so if you can move that, like I literally had a pastor, here's the wrong way to do it. I had a head pastor who was an awful head pastor, and he's not one anymore, but he was my head pastor, and he would tell us, because he used to be a student pastor, you can baptize kids. If they're 16, we only need their consent. So if mom and dad, don't matter if mom and dad say no, don't even ask them. We're not even going to worry about it. We're just going to baptize them. And I went, I looked at him at the moment and went, okay, sure. And then as soon as I turned around, I went, we're not baptizing without consent. So call their parents and get them to say yes or no. And I was going to have that conversation, because here's the thing. Here's a way to drive a student who doesn't go to church away from your church. Baptize them without their parents' permission, and then get their parents to go, well, you ain't going back there, because they didn't even ask. Like, what a stupid strategy. Because if you believe that you need baptism for salvation, we'll do another podcast about why you're wrong. So, but for the rest of us, baptism is not necessary for salvation. It is a symbol, and it's an important one, an important symbol and a step of obedience. But man, to do that without parents being okay with it and knowing about it. And I have had parents who were in the church and were part of it ask us to not do it because they wanted to celebrate with their child. And I said, absolutely. And we didn't do that with them. So just so you have that massive caveat of me, we can maybe have that discussion now. I am totally fine with baptism at camp, mainly because scripturally, I think that you are with the church. They're with their friends. We also videoed it all so that parents had it. We got parents' consent. But I think that for us, it was as close as we could get to the Acts model of, I gave my life to Christ, and now I want to follow him in believer's baptism publicly. And we would do one big baptism at the end of camp. And that gave us a moment. If we had the permission of the student, if the student was led to do that, we had the permission of the parents, we would do it because we thought it was really cool, and we would video it, and then we would worship as a church together. That's how we did it. That's how we do it. That's how I do it now. So.
Yeah.
But I know you're different.
Well, and I appreciate that. And, for me, my thing is more so, like, where do I believe the ordinances take place, and what are the elements that need to be in place for us to partake in those ordinances? For me, the Lord Jesus Christ gave us the ordinances of baptism and the Lord's Supper. Baptism being the entrance into the house of the family, and then the Lord's Supper being the gathering of the family, both centering around the remembrance of and the identification with the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And the way that I've always described it is like, baptism is when one becomes part of the many, and the Lord's Supper is when the many come together as one. They are first and foremost an act of the church before they are the individual's experience. And so it is an individual experience, but it is first and foremost the act of the church. And so for me, when I think of like, okay, well then where does that happen in the context of my local gathering? Well, that gathering of local believers happens on the Sunday morning when we're all together. I hold to that both Lord's Supper and baptism are not to take place outside of the context of our Sunday morning worship gathering, with caveats, right? And so there was a foreign exchange student who was here. She professed faith in Christ and wanted to be baptized. We didn't have a Sunday between when she was making that decision and when she was leaving. Adam, the senior pastor, contacted a bunch of people in the church and said, hey, come gather now. Come gather now. So it was like, she's about to fly out the next day, and like 80 people from the church showed up to a swimming pool in the middle of the country, and they baptized her and videoed it, and they showed it. I'm not so rigid to say that there are not caveats to it. If all of the elements in place are there, I want it to take place in the Sunday morning gathering.
I think that the question that naturally comes into it, I don't think I would say baptism is a personal experience. I think it's a personal expression. And I think it's designed to be that. It is absolutely. I don't know if I think that it is.
I would say maybe individual act, right?
Yeah.
There's an individual act to it But before the individual is a participant in the act, it is an act of the local church, is an act of the body.
Yeah, I would agree with some of that. I think so, and this is kind of is going off on people getting to decide whether they do it at camp or not. I think that the thing is you can do it either way, know why you do it. I think it's important though too, this is always my pet peeve. You know, this is my pet peeve, is when Jesus was baptized. And people say, you should get baptized because Jesus was baptized. And it's absolutely ridiculous.
You wrote a really good blog. I don't know if you even have it anymore.
I do. I think we need to repost it.
Yeah.
But the summary of it is Jesus wasn't baptized as an example to us. Jesus never did anything arbitrarily as an example that he did not need to do for us. And Jesus did not need baptism because baptism is symbolic of it's a sacrament. It's an outward and physical sign of an inward and spiritual change. And so Jesus didn't have that change. Jesus was born perfect, lived perfect for us. Jesus was baptized because baptism predates Jesus in the flesh coming. And it was even in the Old Testament in the Near East, there was an idea of when you were baptized into a teaching or a belief system and pulled out that you were baptizo, you were immersed in Greek and brought back out. And it was a public, baptism, no matter how for me, I see baptism, at least in scripture, baptism is the public expression of God's inward salvation. And that's where we differ a little bit on the rigidity of how we
I think Old Testament too is a little bit more like consecration, like you're really setting yourself apart.
But I would say it's the same thing. Yeah. And so you're setting yourself apart. You're like baptism was a death sentence in the first century for a lot of people because they were publicly setting themselves apart. They were publicly
and still can be in some places in the world.
Absolutely. But the reason I kind of got back on experience with you is because so many people, and you and I know, go, I just need to get baptized again to heal the. No, it was an act of obedience for you to do that. It was not an act of nothing changed in you and through you that was not already done. What happened is that you publicly told everyone, I'm following Jesus. And so for me, at least, Jesus was baptized and he told John, I had to do this to fulfill all righteousness. That meant that Jesus was being immersed in John's teaching publicly for everyone, which the teaching was, he's the Son of Man who's come now, and I'm the forerunner. So that gives us, to me, I see throughout Scripture, that gives us a broader understanding of baptism as a whole, because it is not even unique to first century Christians. It is, however, the mode that God has chosen for us to publicly profess. So for me, on your end, I totally respect exactly what you're saying. I get it. And I think that if a church does that, they're not wrong.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like people will come at me all the time, like, well, what about the Ethiopian eunuch? And like, there is such a thing as an exception to the rule. And the Ethiopian eunuch is an exception to the rule.
There's still the argument to say too, are you not baptizing entire families when the dad gets saved? Like there's a lot of individual exceptional arguments that we go into.
Well, and I think that's to a lot of where Presbyterians go. And I think even some Methodists go that way.
A lot of paedo-baptism arguments. That too.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's just more like, and here's the deal. There's a lot of disagreement, and I think we can have charitable disagreement in that. And I think that's partly what people are hearing.
I hope it is.
But I think, people have divided over baptism for thousands of years, and they're going to continue until the Lord calls us home to divide over that. And that's okay. I think the thing is, you have to understand, like, there's not one right way or wrong. Like, there's a lot of people, there are going to be people in heaven that disagree with you on the ordinance of baptism.
There is a right and wrong way. The truth is, none of us will know that this side of heaven. We know the best we can. To me, maybe I'm wrong, but I keep saying to me, like, I hate that kind of mentality, that kind of word. I don't care if I offend you, I guess is what I should say. I think my issue is not with what you're saying or even what I'm saying and that I'm right and you're wrong. But both of us have, I think, heavily scriptural views of what baptism is. But my point to everybody listening is you need to be incredibly intentional and thought out about how you practice baptism at camp.
For sure.
Events. But I think a lot of us aren't. A lot of us, so many people, the reason that so many people have come to us over the years and said, I need to get baptized again, is because nobody was clear on what baptism was. And some churches do teach, well, yeah, let's do it again. I've heard guys that go, well, I guess you can just do it again if you want to feel better. But that's preaching what is, I feel like, close to a false gospel.
Well, that when people do that, it is reducing baptism down to an individual act alone,
to an experiential one, rather than what I was saying is is the word I use now, that it is an act or is an expression of what God has done. And that's allowing, baptism isn't about you.
Yeah.
It's about God being seen in you and what you've done.
Well, and like, okay, you want to talk about here's where I go into the thing with the church gathering needing to be there.
Right.
Look in Acts, right? Acts 1, I think, the gospel was proclaimed, and it says people believed, and many were added to the number that day of the church in Jerusalem through baptism, right? And so there's not a saving work that's done in baptism, but there is an adding to the number. Well, the number of what? An adding to the number of believing people in the resurrected Christ in the city of Jerusalem. The church grew that day in number. And so that's where I do get the church ordinance thing.
And I think for us, it had just had to do, we believe the church was there. We believe the church was there,
Yeah.
and leaders and 400 leaders.
Which is also what I heard you saying.
Yeah.
Right. So I heard you
We
saying,
don't disagree. Oh, go ahead.
I think that there was just an intent, like I appreciated the way that you worded it in such a way where some of the markers in my mind, that if I were to go there with my caveats, I would say, okay, those are pretty close to some of the markers. Where I can't get there is I so desperately want that to be on a Sunday morning when the 80-year-old people who are not at the beach can be there, and the 5-year-olds that are watching can be there, and all there in between, because it's such a, for me, it's just, and I know for you too, like there's a richness in what you're doing.
Well, because we do that though, that part of that is part of that marker for you. For me, the way that I see it is we created and played those videos because we made sure we shot them. So, and some of the things, so this is just a side note, depending on how traditional your church is or not, it also allowed me, and I don't, this is not an argument that's worth getting into, but I don't think we'd argue on it, but it allowed me to allow people that were qualified to baptize, but who would never be allowed to baptize in the church the way that they would want to. Because at that point, it's the pastors on staff. I was able to allow interns and people like that to come up and baptize students, even a couple of leaders that met those qualifications. Those are cool too. So I think that but I'm with you.
And that is another conversation worth having, because I do think, like, where is the authority within the local church?
I know.
Right. It's within the people. It's within the people. The pastor's not the guy with authority, by the way. The pastor's given authority by the local congregation. Yeah. So when Jesus gives the keys of the kingdom to the apostles, what he's giving them is, hey, this is the doctrine. You are to fence it. You are to uphold it. You are to watch out for it. And so typically when we go to churches and we see the pastors doing the baptisms, it's because they are the ones that have been hired, called to represent the authority of the local congregation within the baptismal waters, or presiding over the Lord's Supper. And so I think we could do such a better job, but it's so much harder because the authority's in the local congregation. I think we ought to be saying, hey, who are the people within the congregation that we want to entrust that responsibility to, who are living in such a way? And I think it gets so difficult when you have to go case by case, because there would be people you would say no to based off how they live and based off their testimony and their walk. You would say, yeah, you're not going to be able to do it. They can. And you get into really icky, murky waters, and we don't like doing that in the South.
No, that's true. Well,
so that's where it's just an easier default for the pastors to do it.
We like our gray to be where nobody can find it in the South.
Yeah. Anyway, you can get me real stirred up when you talk about ordinances.
I think we do. And I think it's good to have a balance of what traditions they come from when we talk. And so we need to do that again, like in the fall, but this is a good one. So let me recap. You can't change the schedule, maybe, but you can always change the story. And maybe if you're early in ministry, if you're late in ministry, if you're just settled into how it is, I hope that we open it up to you a little bit that, man, there is so much you can do and affect now, even if you had one of those zinger moments. And so listen, if you want more of this, become a member at SSM for just $27 a month and unlock everything, including access to our Behind the Wall episode that's coming up, our tools, our resources, and a thriving community of student pastors. And you can try it for free for 2 weeks by just clicking the link below. Now, if you're ready to go deeper, our next segment is for SSM members only. We are unpacking how you can train leaders to have real gospel conversations, because they are your counselors too. And we're going to be using J.D. Greer's book. It's one of my personal favorites for the years. Stop Asking Jesus Into Your Heart. And we are going to, that the title alone might be enough to stir you. But we're going to be walking through that, some actionable things, some leader guide information, and you'll get some practical understandings on how to get away from common pitfalls. Because once I started training leaders this way, I stopped having 80% of non-essential conversations that students were confused about. So love you guys. We're excited going on the other side of the wall. It's been a long one.